in terms of the military doctrines that it has, it does, and it has in the past, preemptively attacked nuclear reactors in the Middle East. The case in point being the Oz-Iraq reactor in Iraq in 1981, preemptively over a concern at that time that Saddam Hussein was possibly developing that reactor with a view to actually developing a nuclear weapons program. And I think that's one background concern that the Americans may have. But the more immediate concern is if you do attack nuclear facilities in Iran, of which there are several, including research centres, including centres where they are enriching uranium that are actually being inspected by the IAEA on a regular basis. So those inspections are ongoing. Those UN inspections have been ongoing and have never stopped. But also a nuclear power reactor in the south that's been operational since, I think, around the late 1970s. By targeting those and striking those, that just would just be a massive escalation in the view of the Iranians. It's not just a direct attack on the country, but obviously there's a massive danger in terms of what it means for the spread of radioactive material, fissile material that they've been producing in some of those centres, and obviously the factor of the loss of civilian life. But I think in this case, that's less of a concern than just symbolically what this would mean, and the reaction it would then trigger in response from the Iranians.
So these sort of multifaceted risks or consequences that can be imagined. President Pezeshkian of Iran has been in Doha and, according to state media, saying that Iran wants peace and security. How much credibility does that hold? How much scope might there be for peace talks, maybe even involving Qatar as an intermediary?
Well, I think that's a very good question, and I think this trip to Doha is very interesting. It was scheduled in advance, so he was meant to be going from a while back, because there's an Asian conference for dialogue. There's a regional conference going on there right now, so he was meant to be going, but it's not a huge deal, that conference. So he could have very easily, maybe under other circumstances, not turned up, because it's a foreign ministerial conference as well. But by going yesterday, it also suggests that he's very likely to want to talk about security in the region and the escalations with Israel, and this concern about there being obviously a full-scale war in the region. And we know that Doha has played a pivotal role over the past best part of a decade now in mediating dialogue, not just between Iran and the US, but more recently between Hamas and Israel over Israel's bombardment in Gaza and trying to secure a ceasefire there. So I think I would be very surprised if Pezeshkian did not arrive in Doha with some thoughts and ideas over how they can de-escalate in the region. It really depends now on whether the Israelis are amenable to anything like that, or whether they've made it sounds like they have made a very decisive choice to retaliate. It's just, we have to look at what the parameters of that retaliation are likely to look like.
And I suppose, what sort of effect could that have in Iran if we're thinking about public opinion, public support, both for those who are in power, but also these other groups like Hezbollah and Hamas that are supported by Iran?
I think that's a very good question. I think one of the challenges and the dilemmas that is facing the Islamic Republic, and specifically the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, is the fact that they are not a popular system at the moment. They have faced incredibly high levels of dissent and internal opposition and unpopularity, and we've seen that from the election figures. They've had, over the past three popular elections in the country, have all hit record lows in terms of participation, not to mention the uprising we had in 2022, which was some of the most violent and deadly oppositional violence since the 1979 revolution. So you can't wage a war or escalate a conflict when you are not, when you can't appeal to your own popularity internally at home. On the other front, in terms of in the region, there has been, we had a story yesterday on the file with myself and my colleague Sam Daher in Dubai, about the perception on the Arab street, specifically in countries like Lebanon, of how Iran has so far responded to Israel. And it was a bit of a mixed bag. There was a lot of celebration in some parts of Beirut over Iran's strike the other day, but at the same time, I think there's a sense of, is that it? Is that all you have to? Is that all you have to show? Is that all you have to, offer us in terms of, spending the last 3 to 4 decades kind of threatening Israel, painting themselves as the defenders of the Palestinian people, of the Palestinian cause, and when it came down to it, when push came to shove, a lot of Lebanese were asking, according to our reporting in that story, where were the Iranians? Why didn't they retaliate more strongly? So it's been a bit of a mixed bag, and I don't think that you can confidently go into a wider conflict knowing that you don't have enough popular grassroots support on your side.
Yeah, and as you say, 3 or 4 decades, it has been a complete rethink, actually, of where the power, strength and the balance of the countries in the Middle East actually is in the last few weeks, which is, I think, quite a lot for specialists like you maybe to be absorbing. What are you thinking about next in terms of the impact? Is it this, we're watching out now for what Israel does in response, what is happening on the ground in Lebanon? What else are you thinking about in this dangerous theatre?
Yeah, well, I think about these questions about the general, to put it in a very basic, simple term, order of things in the Middle East, but more broadly in the world. And for someone, because I've covered Iran for so long, and I think if you're a journalist with a beat, you do tend to suffer from a sort of myopia. You tend to look at things through the lens of that country. But I do think Iran has had this role for the past 50 years now, almost, of being this kind of quite formidable bulwark against US, Western, loosely put, kind of NATO-aligned interests in the Middle East, and of course Israeli interests. And I think now we're kind of seeing this, it's almost like this battle that Khamenei has been waging on a cold front, in a shadow war, and the Israelis have as well. It's now manifesting in these really violent terms, and it's very worrying. It's deeply worrying, but it's also, you kind of, if you take the long view, I think in some ways we have very slowly walked into this situation. If we go back to maybe the 2015 nuclear deal, how it was negotiated, who was negotiating it, who was excluded, who was included, the way that rhetoric on the Western side and action and sanctions on the Western and the European side was handled over Iran's nuclear program going back to 2003. Even if you go back to things like George W. Bush's Axis of Evil speech back in 2002, which happened at exactly the time when Iran was starting a very tentative back-channel effort with the Americans to try and in a coordinated way defeat the Taliban together in Afghanistan. These kind of opportunities that were dashed, and you kind of look, if you take the broad view and you come all the way up to 2019 and Donald Trump and the maximum pressure strategy, assassinating Qasem Soleimani, all this kind of stuff, it all kind of leads to this war scenario that we're now faced with in some ways.
We've been asking the question all morning, is Israel listening to anything the United States has to say? Who could Iran listen to if there were to try and be diplomatic overtures to try and de-escalate this? Is it the people that you're talking about who are unhappy with the regime in Iran? Are there international partners like Russia or China that could exert pressure on Iran now?
I think with the first point about Israel, we have to look at just the past year. Clearly, Israel Israel has not really paid much heed to what the United States has said at all. And in fact, another thing that Pezeshkian said yesterday in Doha that was quite interesting, he made a statement where he said, we want peace and security. We got a phone call from the Americans and the Europeans telling us after the Haniyeh, the assassination of the Hamas political leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, telling us, don't escalate, don't respond, and we will get peace in Gaza within a week. So the suggestion is that there was a quid pro quo there, a ceasefire in exchange for you not escalating. He said that never materialized. So that's another sign that Benjamin Netanyahu is going on his own course, and he's put his earmuffs on, and he doesn't really, he's determined to do whatever it is he needs to do. I think there is obviously also a strong suggestion that he wants to stay. There's a domestic angle to this where he wants to stay in power for as long as he can and maintain his government coalition with the more far-right parties in Israel. On the point about Iran and who can talk to Iran, I think, again, the Doha trip yesterday and Pezeshkian's statements show that Iran, I think, quite reluctantly conducted that missile strike the other night. And I think it felt it really had no choice because of this perception of its loss of credibility. The perception of weakness was something that I don't think, given the amount of domestic unpopularity it's also facing, I don't think it could have... from its own point of view, it could have completely sat down and sat on its hands. Now, in terms of Iran not escalating any further, I don't think it will do anything for now. I mean, there's a chance that, and there is some suggestion. We had a mysterious explosion near the Israeli embassy in Copenhagen around the same time of the strikes. And there is a suggestion that they might take some of this retaliation operation offshore to other parts of the world where they will try to hit diplomatic Israeli assets. But that's, again, something that has precedent that they've done in the past.